Hello, everybody. My name is Mark Fisher, and welcome to our channel, our Scientology Stories, Peeling the Onion. And today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about where are the upper OT levels, OT 9 and 10, which are, for those of you who are not Scientologists or have never been in Scientology, the OT levels are actually the greater states of being that L. Ron Hubbard promised through processing, through Scientology. And he passed away 38 years ago. And there is no OT 9 or 10 out and released all during this time. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about this. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what it's like to solo process yourself. I actually went up the OT levels up to OT 7, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And then I'm going to go back to the L. Ron Hubbard death event back in 1986, where a guy named Pat Broker, who had been around Hubbard his last 6 years, talked a little bit about the future operating Thetan or OT levels that were going to be released and that Hubbard had researched. And I'm going to show you some photographs and talk to you a little bit about that and explain some stories regarding the operating Thetan levels. So here we go, and here we're going to get started here. Where are the OT levels? Okay, L. Ron Hubbard had always ran Scientology with a grade chart, which is basically, he called it the bridge to total freedom. And basically, you started at the bottom and you did each service and level as you moved up to greater and greater spiritual awareness. And that was the what was called the gradation chart or the grade chart. And each level of the chart had an ability gained, something that you did, some sort of processing that you did, and then you would achieve some ability, and it would be stated on that chart. And after you finished each level, you would get a certificate, and you would move up to the next level and the next level and the next level. And that was basically how everybody who was getting Scientology processing was treated. They weren't treated any differently. If you were going up what they called the grade chart, these were the steps that you did step by step. And then once you got to the point where you had gotten rid of your reactive mind, which was basically all the experiences that had come against you, that had pain and unconsciousness and that were holding you back as a spiritual being or a person, once those were erased, you were determined to be clear. And then you went on to the OT levels, or the operating Thetan levels. Okay, so what are we talking about here? Scientology believes that you are not your body. Your body is a vehicle. It's something that you use in order to get through life, but that you are what they call a Thetan or a spirit. Scientology uses the term Thetan. All right. But they say that you are a Thetan. You are not your body. You're separate from your body. And Scientology believes that when you leave your body after you pass away, that you go off as a spiritual being, that you're immortal, and that you will pick up another body and live another lifetime. They believe in reincarnation, that you're going to live over and over and over again. And so they don't consider you a body, they consider you a Thetan. And so the upper levels that Hubbard was researching was how to give you increased abilities as a spiritual being or a Thetan. And that's what we're talking about here when we're talking about the upper levels. Okay. Now, when you do the upper levels, when you do the operating Thetan levels, you have to process yourself solo by yourself. There is no other person in the room. It's just you, the Hubbard, the e-meter there that you see. There are two cans that are connected together, and you hold them in your left hand, or if you're right-handed, whichever your offhand is, you hold them there. Where you're actually, your hand is, the skin is touching both cans, half and half. And it works just like it does when you're being processed by a Scientology auditor. The e-meter sends a small, undetectable electrical current through one can and goes through your body and out the other. And that's the way that the e-meter is used in order to read, whatever your thoughts are or whatever is going on with you. And that's what Scientologists believe, is that the e-meter is a tool to help you achieve spiritual freedom. So, like, for instance, you'll actually ask yourself a list of questions, and you'll watch the meter, the dial over there. There's a needle, and you watch to see if it reads when you say apples, oranges, whatever. And if there's a little reed, some kind of reed on the needle, you mark it down. That's what the paper and the pens are for. And then that tells you areas. If you're a Scientologist and you're doing this sort of thing, these are areas that you want to address and handle in your processing. I'm just using apples and oranges as an example. Anyway, when you're doing solo auditing, you're actually trained first off as a solo auditor to do this yourself, and it's done silently. So when you're actually doing the process yourself, you're silently reading the commands. You see them, you read them, just like if you're reading a book to yourself or whatever. You're reading the commands and watching the meter, and then noting down the reaction to the meter. And there's different steps that you're supposed to take, and you take it step by step and write down what's going on. One of the things that you have to do when you're doing your OT levels is you have to be able to take your awareness and use it, be able to concentrate it on different areas of your body. For instance, think about your right hand and put your attention on your right hand. Think about your left hand, put your attention solely on your left hand or on your left index finger or whatever it is. There's different drills that you do so that you can actually focus your attention on different parts of your body, right? Because what you're doing, as you probably know, is that you're at some point when you get up to OT3, which everybody knows is the Xenu level, and where you're trying to get rid of what they call L. Ron Hubbard called body thetans. And these were spirits that he believed were attached to people's bodies, that just like you're a spirit, but these were spirits that didn't have a body, that were attached to your body, and that they were stuck, and they couldn't go and leave unless you did this processing to free them and let them leave and go someplace else and go pick up another body. They were stuck to you. Okay, and there were thousands of these things in Hubbard's mind, right? So basically, you're using that meter in order to spot the different beings, or whatever you call them, body thetans, on your body. And the way you would find them is like you would start scanning your body. You could start on your left hand or whatever it is, part of your body, and you watch the meter and you look and you focus on these things. And if you get a read and there's a mass there, then according to Hubbard, you found one, and then you run this process on them until they actually blow and leave, and the needle starts to float and they're gone away. That's the simplicity of what you're doing. There's more detail than that, but that's what Scientologists believes that are doing their OT levels. They believe in the e-meter helping them, and they believe that there are these spiritual beings attached to them. And that's why they don't tell you about this when you first get into Scientology, because it sounds ridiculous, right? It sounds fanciful. It sounds ridiculous, and it's taken on faith. So once you get up to the point where you're a dedicated Scientologist, well, then you'll believe anything Hubbard says, because Hubbard is source. He's the founder and the person who's found how to save mankind, right? So when you're in that mindset, you believe what he's telling you. And so you start looking for these things and getting rid of them. Once you're done with OT3, then you go back into another OT level, the next one, where, by the way, there are more of these beings stuck to you, but they're like unconscious and drugged, and they can't, you can't communicate with them yourself. So now you need a Scientology processor in order to be able to remove them. And this is what's called New Era Dynetics for OTs, which is NOTS. They call it NOTS for short, NOTS. And that takes hours and hours and hours of auditing by somebody in the room doing similar things, having you spot different beings and different body thetans and things like that on your body or attached to you somehow, and getting rid of them. And it takes a long time, and it costs a lot of money, right? So you finish this, finally, you finish after all this time, you spend all this money to get rid of these things. And then you go on to your next level, where you're taught how to solo process again, but this time you're looking yourself without an auditor for even more of these spiritual beings that are attached to you. And so that's OT6. And then on OT7 is called solo knots, where you're actually solo processing, looking for more of these body thetans and getting rid of them. And it takes hundreds and hundreds of hours of processing, and there are tens of thousands of these things according to Scientology and Hubbard. So it takes a long time and it costs a lot of money. Now, in retrospect, after leaving Scientology, I got up to this level when I was in Scientology as a Sea Org member and I was auditing these things. And I believed it at the time. I thought I was getting rid of these things and it was making me feel much better, right? But after, after 34 years since I last did one of these sessions, I realized that, it's a bunch of BS. It's not something that I believe anymore. And it's something fanciful. And to me, it was just a hook that Hubbard used to get people to continue to pay for services and continue up what he considered were the bridge to total freedom, right? Now, how did Hubbard come up with these things? Okay, what did he actually do? Like, how did he do his research? Well, he actually was solo auditing himself for years and years and years. So when he would go into session on a daily basis, he was basically messing with his mind, using the meter, searching for different routes and different ways, to get rid of things and to go further and deeper on what they call the time track, meaning back in time, going back thousands and thousands and billions of years ago. That's why on OT3 it's 75 million years ago or whatever, that I can't remember the exact date. But he really believed that, we've lived for billions and billions of years, and so he's going back further and further in order to get rid of these things. And he's going after it for certain abilities. For instance, he wanted to get rid of amnesia, so that whenever you die and you drop your body, so that the next lifetime, when you pick up your next body, you remember everything that happened in your previous life. And it's right there, just like what I ate for lunch yesterday. That's what he was trying to do, is get those abilities and get them regained by people through solo auditing. So he did these processes and did this experimenting on himself. That's what he was doing. He was doing that for years, doing it on himself. And obviously he was getting crazier and crazier in terms of the different things that he was doing and the different things that he was saying. Anyway, I recently did a video on L. Ron Hubbard has died. Right? L. Ron Hubbard's dead. The death event, January 24th, 1986 is when he died. And then shortly thereafter, there was an event at the Hollywood Palladium in which it was announced that he had dropped his body because it had become an encumbrance and he needed to move on because he was doing other OT levels outside of his body, right? So I wanted to, I was going over that transcript and reading it because I hadn't read it since I had been at the event in 1986. And I wanted to talk a little bit about what was mentioned in that event and what has occurred over the last 38 years. You can catch this video. It's on our channel. L. Ron Hubbard is dead, January 24th, 1986. Watch it if you like. I think you'll find it interesting. All right. So here we go. So this is a gentleman, his name is Pat Broker, and he was at the event. He and his wife, Annie Broker, were with Hubbard the last 6 years of his life when he was on the run and in hiding from the IRS and different lawsuits. And Pat Broker was responsible for L. Ron Hubbard's security, and his wife, Annie, took care of L. Ron Hubbard. And that's a whole nother story, which is covered on other videos that I've done. But basically, they were incognito. We had not seen them in years. But when Hubbard died, Pat Broker showed up on the scene, and he basically was at this event, and he was introduced and made some various announcements and released information to the public for the first time. And I want to read to you some of the things that he said about L. Ron Hubbard and his death. So I'm going to try and share my screen with you in just 1 second here. If you will bear with me, I'm going to share my screen. It'll just take a second here. Okay, so here it is right here. So Pat Broker, that was a picture of him from the event. And this is just a portion. I've highlighted sections of what he said at this event. It's Pat Broker. And he says, around January, late January 1982, he, meaning L. Ron Hubbard, made a significant breakthrough on what is now New OT8. truth revealed. And again, OT stands for operating thetan, and that's a spiritual level that Scientologists wanted to achieve beyond OT7, right? And and as it was at that time that he found the primary cause for amnesia on the whole track. The whole track is the time track going back millions and trillions of years. As he mentioned in that Ron's journal, RJ39, I think it is, that opened up to him significant stretches of track, meaning time, time periods that were previously unavailable and or in some cases not even known about. So he's trying to claim, Pat Broker, that in late 1982, L. Ron Hubbard discovered, he unlocked these things that basically opened up new areas that he could go into to look for new operating thetan abilities. Pat Broker showed this photograph, right, and he blanked out the top and the bottom, but that's a series of numbers, right? And it's a worksheet, and that's L. Ron Hubbard's writing, and he held it up to the camera to demonstrate something. I have here a worksheet from one of L. Ron Hubbard's sessions in late 1982. This makes up now what is OT10 character. So he's claiming that this is from L. Ron Hubbard researching OT10, not just OT8 or 9, is OT10. This block that you can see consists of a series of numbers, 3 numbers, comma, another 3 numbers, comma, and it's about, it's 12 down and it's 15 across. This there is a date. So basically he's saying it's numbers, and then all these zeros, trillions and trillions of years ago, that L. Ron Hubbard is looking at and dating an incident, right? And Pat Broker showing this to try to impress everybody who's watching this event. I wanted to show you the significance, the magnitude of the research he's done these last 6 years. This level took him 2 years. While in that 2-year period, he did OT9, orders of magnitude, and OT10, character. Around summer 1984, he said at that point that he would not be able to, that he would soon come to a point he would have to discard the body and do it completely free from encumbrances. This was in the summer of 1984. As we approached the end of the year, he was just about there, discovered something else, called it off, went on into finishing this, went back with rearview mirrors to that complete, finalize, and polish up what he had been doing since 1980, these advanced levels, and then proceeded on until he got to that point. And then on January 19th, 1986, he stated that that was it. And he then handled in session those things that were necessary so that he could completely sever all ties. And then on January 24th, 1986, he laid down in his bed and he left, and that was it. So what he is describing there is L. Ron Hubbard dying, okay, in 1986. And he's claiming, Pat Broker, that Hubbard causatively and knowingly left his body, okay, and that he finished his research and he needed to carry on without the encumbrance of his body. In actual fact, that's a complete lie, we found out later. L. Ron Hubbard had had several strokes. He was in poor health. He was not going to live very long, and he had been treated for different ailments and illnesses, and he was basically about ready to die. And so those different dates he's talking about were different times, apparently, that, they're claiming that he developed, some new thing and that he was just going to causatively move on and leave his body. Well, that's not the case at all. He actually died of a stroke on January 24th. The last week that he was alive, they actually called somebody up to his secret location, which nobody knew about, named Ray Midoff, and he was the senior case supervisor, technical person for Scientology, and he was called up there to deliver some processing to Hubbard before he died, and then he died. All right. The other thing that's not mentioned by Pat Broker is that he was nowhere around during this time period. That was another complete lie. Pat Broker had actually been banished from the ranch where L. Ron Hubbard was at Creston about 6 months beforehand and told not to come back until he had gotten the legal clearance from the different lawsuits and the IRS so that L. Ron Hubbard could come out of hiding and actually could go back to the base at Golden Era Productions to continue his research, to do his movies, to do all the different things he needed. So Pat Broker was not even there. Okay. And nobody knew that at the time. It was found out about later. All right. That's what was going on regarding that. Okay. I'm going to show you what happened next. All right. They did release OT8, new OT8. This is David Miscavige with a bunch of new OT8 people who have completed OT8. That was released on the ship, the ship Free Winds, and that was the whole delivery thing that they were going to do on the ship, which was OT8 after OT7. And OT8, though, unfortunately, only took about 2 weeks to do, if that. So basically, the people who had finished OT7, they were finishing OT8 very quickly, and it was going very fast. So they were going like, okay, well, when are you going to release OT9, OT10? Because we want to know what's going on regarding that. So here, back to this thing, the thing that Pat Broker said, right? I'm going to go down here to another section of it. OT9 and 10 are also written up and finished. There are several other OT levels that it is my job, Pat Broker, to compile. It consists of taking what he has written, L. Ron Hubbard, and putting it essentially in paragraph form, adding the appropriate HCLB, which is a Hubbard Communication Off Bulletin references that that go along with the auditing necessary to do this particular level, and they'll be released in due course. We have materials that are in this form, in in a thick sheaf of notes per folder of OT11, OT12, OT13, and so forth. And then about, a stack this high to be sorted out of subsequent OT levels. We also, by the way, have the OT level that is going to be done immediately after every person, Thetan, discards his or her body. He wrote that up before he went. Okay. So Broker was saying that these things were all written up, that, OT 910, all these different things, the OT 910 were fully compiled and ready to go. And that the other OT levels, it was his job to put them together. And, Hubbard had already done the research and they just needed to be put in paragraph form and out it would come. And this was January 1986. Okay. So where are we today? Today is February 2024, and there is no OT 9, 10, or any OT levels beyond that from L. Ron Hubbard. Well, management, David Miscavige and Scientology management decided, well, we can't put out OT 9 and 10 for a while because we need to create more people who want those services. So we're going to put a carrot out on the stick in front of everybody, and that was that every organization in Scientology needed to grow to the size of L. Ron Hubbard's original organization at St. Hill Manor in England, and they all needed to grow to the size of Old St. Hill before they would release OT9 and OT10. All right, that meant every organization in the world had to, it was worked out how much they needed to increase their production, and it was 5.4 times their production in order to get to what was considered St. Hill size. This is L. Ron Hubbard in front of St. Hill Manor. That's St. Hill Manor on the left. Okay, and then this was what Scientology was like back in those days in the 1960s. On the right there, you see L. Ron Hubbard outside the front arrival area for St. Hill, and these are all public people that were doing Scientology courses there at the time, and it was booming. There were a lot of people on course there, and on the left you see L. Ron Hubbard actually supervising students and training auditors and all that, and it was big and booming. It was making a lot of money, and it was very, very successful. So the job was to create this, get every org up to that size. And so that was all created, what they called a birthday game, where the organizations competed to try and get bigger and bigger and bigger. And that was what management's job was to do. Well, what happened? That hasn't happened. There were a few organizations that they considered to be St. Hill size over the years, but they were all a facade. basically people were brought in in order to make it look that big, and then eventually they just all fell apart. And what did Miscavige do? Instead, he started what he called his ideal organization program, which was basically buying real estate, getting donations from rich Scientologists to buy real estate in major cities, in downtown areas, and eventually get enough donations to renovate those buildings and make them into show places when they didn't even have any staff members or public to justify those spaces. And then he's been going around the world over the last 15, 20 years, cutting ribbons for these ideal organizations, and they look fantastic when they open them up because they have all these people on staff and there, lots of people there. But the fact of the matter is, it's all a facade. These staff members are brought in from other organizations to make them look good to the donating public, the people who are donating the money, to make it look like Scientology expansion. Look at, we're opening up this new organization. But if you go to some of those organizations right now and you went and walked to their parking lot, they'd be empty. All right, they're empty. There's no public there. Scientology has been shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. But meanwhile, Miscavige has been getting rich Scientologists to donate more and more and more. Why? Why? What is the reason that they do that? It's because of the promise of they want to get to OT9 and OT10 because they believe in L. Ron Hubbard and the research that he was supposedly supposed to do. And they think it's important. And they have these people, they're like fish on the line. They are just reeling them in all the time. And it's always like, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming, and it has not come. So what was supposed to happen with OT9 and 10? Well, Ray Midoff, right there on the right, he was the senior case supervisor international, and it was his job, per Pat Broker, as he mentioned in there, to compile and get out OT9 and OT10, right? He did OT8, he got that out. It turns out, there were mistakes in OT8, and they had to redo it because there were such bad public relations, and the results from OT8 were not very satisfactory to the people who did it, all right? So OT9 and OT10, Ray Midoff was supposed to go through L. Ron Hubbard materials and compile them into paragraph form. But what was the problem with that? Oh, okay. Well, what happened? I can tell you what happened. When L. Ron Hubbard died, he had filing cabinets full of his auditing, research, and processing that he had done. We're talking 8 to 10 three-drawer filing cabinets full of this stuff. Why do I know that? Because after Hubbard died, Pat Broker kept these things hidden from the rest of Scientology management as basically ransom, right, in order to keep his position of control. Miscavige wanted control of Scientology, but he couldn't take over and take out Pat Broker until he got these research materials because they were that valuable to Scientology and Scientologists. Whoever had that material held the future of Scientology. It's a long story, which I cover in another video that I'm going to put a link down below and that you can watch. But I'll just let you know that Miscavige arranged and actually got the materials, found out where they were, and had a bunch of private investigators and Marty Rathman go to the location, get all those filing cabinets, and bring them to the Gold Base at Gilman Hot Springs. How do I know this? I was the person at Gilman Hot Springs who got a phone call from David Miscavige in 1987 and said, Mark, at 2 o'clock in the morning, 2:30, something like that. He called, I had a landline in my bedroom, and he called me and he said, Mark, Marty Rathman and Norman Starkey are going to be showing up with a truck here shortly. And I need you to go up to the L. Ron Hubbard safe room at the property there. We had Gilman Hot Springs in a building called the Middle Villa. L. Ron Hubbard actually had a room where his valuables were kept. It was a safe room. And I had access to that room. I had the combination and the keys and that type of thing to get in there. But I was the only person that had access to that at the property. So maybe Miscavige did too, but I was the only one there. And Miscavige was actually out of California. He was in Washington, D.C. And so they pulled off this raid. They got the materials. And so a truck pulled up, and Marty Rathman, Norman Starkey, and some private investigators, they carted in these 8 to 10 three-drawer filing cabinets and put them into the L. Ron Hubbard safe room. And Miscavige told me that don't ask any questions as to what it is. And when they put it in there, I need you to change all the locks and security so that only you know them. And he said, I need you not to tell anybody or let anybody have access, including Pat Broker and Annie Broker or anybody like that. He said, the only person that has access is you and me. And I said, yes, sir. And that's what I did. I changed the locks and all that. Anyway, what was in those filing cabinet drawers? What was in there? It was all of his processing worksheets with those numbers and things like that, right? Well, it turns out that he hadn't actually, put all these OT levels into paragraph form. And when Ray Midoff was supposed to compile and put these things together, he couldn't remember how to do it or what to do with it because there was no instructions on it. It just was a bunch of gobbledygook from Hubbard on his worksheets. So there is no OT 9 or 10 from L. Ron Hubbard. And Ray Midoff got in big trouble by David Miscavige, and he's basically been persona non grata ever since. So there is no OT 9 and 10. That is the truth. Okay. Ray Midoff forgot any instructions or anything like that, and so it is gone. All right, I'm going to go to one last thing that Pat Broker said at this event. Let me share my screen one more time. He wanted to reinforce to everybody that L. Ron Hubbard may have physically dropped his body, but that he is still source. And what they mean, what source is, it was a reference to Hubbard. Hubbard called himself source. He was the source of all information, all technology, all everything in Scientology. In other words, it was his word, his research. And Scientologists had that drilled into their heads that whatever he said goes and that he was source. And Pat Broker wanted to reiterate it. This is Pat Broker speaking again. I've highlighted sections. There is not, was, is. There is only one source. Source does not pass to management. Source does not pass from L. Ron Hubbard to any other Thetan spirit. Source is source. What made source? What is it about L. Ron Hubbard that was source? His technology, his discoveries, his grades, his OT levels. Nobody else ever discovered it. He did. That's what made him source. And we still have that. Okay. So he basically was reiterating, follow what L. Ron Hubbard says. Nobody else is source for Scientology. It's L. Ron Hubbard only, and only L. Ron Hubbard who discovered all of this stuff, right? That's what Pat Broker was drilling into everybody at that time. So I asked David Miscavige, where are these OT levels? You've been holding them out as a carrot for all these years, and OT 9, 10, 11, 12, all that's not there. So when are you going to release this? Oh, or is it just a big facade to get wealthy billionaire, millionaire Scientologists to donate all their money to Scientology so you can basically create and run your real estate empire across the world and have all this money in order to have private investigators and people harassed and all the abuses done in Scientology, right? Tax exempt money. Where are these OT levels is what I asked David Miscavige. The fact of the matter is that they don't exist. And the fact of the matter is they were all dreamed up by L. Ron Hubbard, who quote unquote is source. It's in his mind. There's nothing scientific about it. Okay. David Miscavige, he can create these new levels if he wanted to, anytime that he wants to, and can say they were L. Ron Hubbard. And guess what? The sheep would believe him, meaning the Scientologists who were true believers, they would believe him and believe that. But he's not doing that because Scientology keeps shrinking. It's basically a huge con. Okay. So that's the true story of where are the OT levels and what's going to happen in the future. There are other organizations, former Scientologists outside of Scientology. Ron's organization, Ron's org, I think it's called, where Captain Bill Robertson created up to OT 42, and they believe it and they follow it. More power to them if that's what makes them happy and all that. But as far as Scientology goes, the OT levels end at OT 7 and OT 8, and there's no further pathway after that. And to be honest with you, looking back on my experience with the OT levels, they were a bunch of bunk. You know what I mean? 34 years later, I don't have any superhuman abilities or anything like that. I'm just a man. I believe I am a spiritual being, but I'm a man, you know, and I don't have all these superhuman abilities that, oh, quote unquote, were promised by L. Ron Hubbard in Scientology. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe to my channel, Our Scientology Stories Peeling the Onion. It helps us get this word out to other people who might be interested in hearing about the abuses and staying away from cults like Scientology. So please subscribe, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and the notifications button. It really helps out. If you have any questions or comments about what I've talked about, please ask down below. I check them all the time and I do respond to them. So I would really appreciate it if you would do that. And then finally, if you want to donate to our channel, you can buy me a coffee down. There's a link down in the description below. Just click on that link and you can buy me a coffee, which is basically a donation to the channel. The money that we get, we just put back into the channel. We're not getting rich off of this by any means, but we want to continue telling our stories about the history of Scientology, the abuses of Scientology, and the stories of the people who were abused. That's what the purpose of this channel is, and that's what we are doing. So anyway, if you feel like donating, please do so at Buy Me a Coffee. Finally, if you'd like to get some of our merchandise, we do have a store. You can click on that store button and get some of the merchandise. We have t-shirts, we have hoodies, we have coffee mugs. You can get autographed copies of my partner Janice Gillen Brady's book, and she will send them to you. You can get Koala Calm, which is a magnesium drink that her company produces. There's lots of different things there. So, and again, if you're interested, please click on that merchandise store and buy whatever it is that you like. And we hope that you enjoy them. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. I appreciate your time in watching. And until the next time, bye-bye. We'll see you later.